After waiting over 2 years, we finally see the release of Fading Afternoon, the latest from the developers of The Friends of Ringo Ishikawa and Arrest of a Stone Buddha. Before we find out if it was worth the wait, why don't you not wait and check us out at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. You better be careful, because if you don't, I might send a Yakuza on you. Fading Afternoon tells the story of Seiji Maruyama, a middle-aged Yakuza recently released from prison. Straight from the developer's mouth on their own Steam page, it says, quote, "Old tropes are here, but you can choose to not follow them. The question is, does anything really matter that much now?" And honestly, it's kind of telling that they know that they're kind of just ripping things off. Despite The Friends of Ringo Ishikawa coming out all the way back in 2018, you're going to see a lot of similarities between that game and Fading Afternoon. For those of you that are unfamiliar with The Friends of Ringo Ishikawa, it was kind of a River City Ransom knockoff, all the way to the point of you playing as high school street hooligans. But now in Fading Afternoon, instead of playing as a teenager, you're playing as an aging Yakuza, as was previously mentioned. And for those of you that don't know, the Yakuza is essentially the Japanese version of the mob. So now instead of just being a bunch of teenagers fighting over territory and turf, now you're a bunch of older people fighting over territory and turf. You're essentially getting River City Ransom meets the Yakuza / Like a Dragon series. There are multiple crime families that are struggling for power within the city. You yourself work for one of these crime bosses, and he has put you in charge again now that you're available for some dirty work. Instead of being a big sprawling open world like one might expect from these types of games, instead, you just have an overhead map where you'll select which location you'd like to travel to next. The game is rather light on story and is focused more on you exploring and figuring things out on your own. It's definitely a much more old school experience than some might be used to. Instead of the big usual flashing exclamation point of "here's your next mission," you kind of just have, here are the different things that you can go to, and they might have an icon telling you that there's a certain gang presence there. You start off the game with only a bit of money to your name, but no transportation or place to live. You're going to find yourself taking the train everywhere and having to pay for a hotel. It's at this point that you need to decide what is your priority when you start making money. Do you use it to buy a car so you can get to more places during the day? Or do you want a better place to sleep at night so that you'll be more rested and recover more? There is a day cycle, so there's only so many things that you can do in one particular day. When you're taking the train, it does take longer to get there, so you can only do fewer tasks within that 24-hour period. After that point, you need to go to sleep, and you choose whether it's going to be in a hotel, a place that you bought, or are you just going to rough it and sleep on a bench in the streets? These are just a few of the many examples of choices that are presented to you while playing Fading Afternoon, and there are multiple endings that can be earned once you finish the game. While there is the exploration and mini-games to play, the meat of the game is going to be in the combat. The majority of your time playing is going to be spent getting into scuffles with other local Yakuza gangs around town. You can tell which gang is which by what colors they're wearing on their clothing, and within those gangs, there are different members that all have a particular fighting style or weapon that they use. Learn the different attack patterns of these various enemies and what strategies will work best, and you can take out everybody on the screen and clear that area for your gang. Clear enough of them and you'll earn more respect, and as that respect goes up, more people will help you out in your battles. Besides the usual punching and kicking combos, you can learn other little special techniques, like disarming your enemy from their sword and cutting everybody up, or even breaking their arm with a nice satisfying snap. Overall, the combat is very satisfying, especially as you learn the timing to get the various counters down. You start off with only a few locations where the battles can happen in, so you're going to be in a lot of the same backgrounds over and over again, fighting the same enemies. It does get a bit monotonous despite how fun the combat can be. Early on, you can unlock another mode called Rumble Mode, which focuses solely on the combat, but don't expect it to play like a typical brawler. You just simply select what location you want to fight in, and you stay in that one little area the entire time that you fight. You can select what the weather is and what types of enemies that you're fighting, as well as starting health, but only certain settings will allow you to actually compete on leaderboards. There's definitely some fun to the gameplay, but it does get repetitive and it is easy to get lost and not know what to do next, so you might find yourself going in circles and getting a little bit frustrated. You have to have a bit of perseverance to be able to make some actual progress while playing the game. All of this is on top of other janky elements that you'll probably run into, like accidentally leaving the screen, which will advance time, or wanting to do a particular action and instead you start smoking a cigarette. You can press LB at various times to let you know what buttons are going to be able to do what, and you're going to need it often because it does get confusing. The A button is cancel, but it's not because B is to accept. That actually goes to the X button this time. So constantly buttons things aren't what you think that they would be. These controls are also just listed to you as just a generic shape of the controller and a blank button to tell you which one it is that you press. Granted, if you play previous games, it'll still list the keyboard controls even if you're using a controller, so I guess it is somewhat of an improvement. Graphically, Fading Afternoon has a nice 16-bit pixel art style that is actually animated quite fluidly as well, but unfortunately it doesn't seem all that different from playing previous games that the developer has made. It seems that they've lifted direct animations and sprites with only some minor tweaks. It's definitely awe-inspiring when you first start pulling off these combos with flippy kicks and disarming weapons from the enemies that result in you stealing a sword and cutting a guy up. The sound effects in Fading Afternoon are serviceable, it's what you would expect, although it does get pretty satisfying to hear the arm snapping sound. But I'm gonna have to give one of the weirdest complaints I think I've ever had to do in all my time reviewing games. While the music in Fading Afternoon is fantastic and I would love listening to it on its own, it does not fit the theme of the game at all. Maybe a bit when you're walking through and just exploring the city and it has that bit of a cinematic movie soundtrack feel, but once you enter battle, it shouldn't feel like you're still sitting in some noir detective's office. Just as I feel that there are fans of the Dynasty Warriors series where they can go off and play Samurai Warriors and still have just as much fun, I think that's what you're gonna get if you're a fan of the developer for Fading Afternoon. If you like their previous games and you don't mind it not being changed all that much, then you're still gonna have a good time. There's certainly a bit of jank that you need to get through, but this is something that might have a bit of charm to a certain segment of gamers. It's definitely not the worst game that I've played and it has its issues, but I definitely can see there being a group of people that will enjoy it, although I can't really recommend paying full price for this game.